Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. The warm Georgia air wrapped around Killian Graves as he stepped out of the taxi, his duffel bag slung over his broad shoulder. His heart should have been pounding with excitement. 6 years was a long time to be away from home. A long time to dream about this moment. Instead, a strange coldness settled in his chest. Something was wrong. His house looked the same. A 2-story suburban home, the one he had saved for, built dreams around with Savannah. His wife. The porch light was on. Someone was home. He adjusted his grip on his bag, his muscles tense. Would she even recognize him? The war had changed him. He wasn't the same 26-year-old husband she kissed goodbye when he left. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, pushing the door open. Unlocked. His eyes narrowed. Savannah never left the front door unlocked. He walked in. The smell hit him first. A scent that didn't belong. Cologne, strong, expensive, and unfamiliar. His boots barely made a sound as he stepped further inside. His eyes scanned the living room. New furniture. A half-empty whiskey glass sat on the coffee table. Men's boots, large like his own, rested near the couch. His grip tightened on his duffel. Then from upstairs he heard it. A soft, breathy laugh. Savannah's laugh. A sound he had memorized in the deepest part of his soul. Then a man's voice. Familiar. Too damn familiar. His blood turned to ice. Slowly he moved to the staircase, every step measured, controlled. His military instincts kicked in. If this were a mission, he'd be calculating angles, threats, the fastest way to neutralize the enemy. But this was no battlefield. This was his home. He reached the bedroom door, slightly ajar. His heart pounded, but his face remained unreadable. He pushed the door open. And then, his world shattered. Savannah. His wife. The woman he sent letters to, the woman he dreamed of at night. She was tangled in silk sheets, her bare skin glowing in the dim bedroom light. Not alone. The man beside her froze. A face Killian had once called brother. Roman Calloway. His ex-best friend. Killian's fingers curled into fists, but he didn't move. He didn't say a word. He just stared. Roman was the first to react, his face draining of color. Killian? You were supposed to be dead. Savannah gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. Killian. Silence. Killian didn't rage. Didn't explode. He simply turned around and walked away. The last thing he heard was Savannah sobbing, Roman cursing. But their voices were nothing but static now. Was I better off dead? The night air was cool against his burning skin. Killian walked aimlessly, his body on autopilot. He had survived 6 years in war zones, seen men torn apart by bullets, had watched friends die in his arms. None of that hurt as much as this. His hands trembled, rage and betrayal flooding through his veins. He wanted to turn back, rip Roman apart, scream at Savannah until his throat bled. But he didn't. Because Killian had learned something in war. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about precision. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. His fingers hovered over Savannah's number. He could demand an explanation. Ask her why. Why she did this. But did it even matter? Instead, he did something else. He called Bishop Kane. An old military friend. An underground fixer. A man who knew how to make people disappear, or suffer. The phone rang twice before Bishop answered. Well. Thought you were dead, Graves? Not yet, Killian said flatly. But someone's about to wish I was. Pause. Then Bishop chuckled. Tell me everything. And so Killian did. By the time he finished, his voice was steady. His hands no longer shook. Bishop exhaled. Damn. That's cold. I'm not done. Killian's voice was ice. I want them ruined. Slowly. Completely. I don't want them to know it's me until it's too late. A low laugh. I've got some ideas. Killian's grip tightened on the phone. Roman and Savannah had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Savannah woke up alone. She had barely slept. Her mind raced with panic, guilt, and dread. She had betrayed her husband. And now he was gone. She had tried calling him all night. No answer. Roman was pacing the room, his jaw tight. This isn't good, Savannah. She turned on him, eyes blazing. You think I don't know that? He just left. Roman stopped. And that scares me. That's not like him. Savannah swallowed. He was right. Killian was a fighter. He had never backed down from a challenge. So why had he just walked away? The sound of her phone buzzing made her jump. She grabbed it. Blocked call. She hesitated before answering. Hello? Silence. Then a voice she barely recognized anymore. You look good in silk. Her blood ran cold. Killian. The line went dead. Her hands trembled as she turned to Roman, panic in her eyes. He's not gone. He's watching us. Roman exhaled sharply, looking out the window. Yeah. And I have a feeling this isn't over. Roman couldn't shake the feeling. Something was wrong. It wasn't just the guilt eating at him, it was the way Killian left. No screaming, no punching, no threats. Just silence. That wasn't the Killian he knew. He sat at his desk, scrolling through his company's financial reports. Everything was in order, for now. Then his phone buzzed. A known number. He hesitated before answering. Hello? A deep, familiar voice spoke. Do you know what happens when you betray a brother? Roman's breath caught. Killian. His grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? A low chuckle. What I want? Roman, I already took it. You just don't know it yet. Click. The call ended. Roman stared at the phone, his pulse hammering. He had never been scared of Killian before. But this wasn't the same man he once called his best friend. This was someone else. And that terrified him. Savannah sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. Her eyes were puffy from crying. She had called Killian over 50 times. No answer. Roman hadn't told her about the phone call. He didn't need to. They both knew Killian wasn't done. Just then Savannah's laptop screen flickered. A video started playing. Her breath hitched. It was a recorded message. And there on the screen was Killian. He sat in a dark room, his eyes sharp, his face unreadable. Calm. Too calm. Then he spoke. Thank you all for your love and support. We've successfully reached 1,000 subscribers, and this is just the beginning. Savannah's skin turned ice cold. Who was he talking to? Killian smirked. I'll be putting in even more effort to bring you the best and most engaging stories. And trust me, the next chapter? It's gonna be unforgettable. Roman appeared behind her, his face pale as a ghost. What the hell is this? Killian's voice continued. Now let's aim for 2,000 subscribers. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Savannah covered her mouth, her stomach twisting in fear. Killian leaned closer into the camera, his piercing gaze staring straight through the screen. And before I go, tell me. Which city are you watching from? The screen glitched, then cut to black. Silence. Roman swallowed hard. He's playing with us. Savannah's hands trembled. No, Roman. He's warning us. The next morning, Savannah woke up to screaming. She ran downstairs, finding Roman flipping over furniture, throwing papers everywhere. What the hell are you doing? She yelled. Roman's face was drenched in sweat. He hacked my accounts, my business. Everything is locked. Savannah's stomach dropped. What do you mean, everything? Roman turned the laptop screen to her. Her breath caught. Killian had wiped his accounts. Completely. Roman's company funds were frozen. His clients were pulling out. And at the bottom of the screen, a message flashed. This is only the beginning. Roman slammed the laptop shut. I'll kill him. Savannah's heart pounded. She knew Roman wasn't the one in control anymore. Killian was. And this was just the start. Roman sat in his office, his fingers digging into his scalp. His entire world was crumbling. In less than 24 hours, Killian had done something no one else had ever managed. He had ripped apart Roman's financial empire without lifting a single finger. His company's assets were frozen. His business partners were backing out. And worst of all, his name was being dragged through the mud online. Roman slammed his fists onto the desk. He's not just trying to ruin me. He's trying to erase me. Savannah stood near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. What do we do? The word made Roman grit his teeth. He had risked everything for her. Betrayed his best friend, thinking he would be better off without Killian. And now he was the one fighting to survive. He picked up his phone and made a call. Bishop. We need to talk. Bishop Kane leaned against his black muscle car, a cigarette hanging from his lips. He watched as Roman pulled into the empty parking lot. Bishop had always been a dangerous man. But tonight, as Roman stepped out, he realized, so was Killian. And that was a problem. Roman stormed up to him. I need information. Killian is screwing with me. Bishop exhaled smoke, studying him. Yeah, I heard. Roman's eyes narrowed. You knew. Bishop chuckled. Let me tell you something, Roman. There's a reason Killian made it out of every war zone alive. There's a reason people called him the Phantom. Roman stiffened. What are you saying? Bishop flicked his cigarette. I'm saying, if Killian is after you, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. Savannah scrolled through her phone, her fingers trembling. Her inbox was flooded with messages. Savannah, what the hell is going on? Why are people talking about you and Roman? I thought Killian was dead. You cheated on him? You're disgusting. Hope you enjoy the hell you created, homewrecker. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't just online. Her job had called. She was fired. Her friends weren't answering her messages. She had gone from respected to despised overnight. Killian was tearing her apart, piece by piece. Her vision blurred with tears. She had never believed in karma. But now, she was drowning in it. Savannah threw her phone across the room. He's not going to stop, she screamed. Roman stormed in, his face dark. We need to leave town. Tonight. Savannah stared at him. Run? You think running will save us? Roman grabbed her shoulders. Killian is playing a game we can't win. The only way out is disappearing. But Savannah shook her head. She knew something Roman didn't. Killian wasn't just attacking their lives. He was inside their heads. And the worst part? He was enjoying it. Roman grabbed his duffel bag and threw clothes into it. His mind was racing. He needed cash. He needed an escape plan. He needed to be 3 steps ahead of Killian. Just as he reached for his gun safe, his phone buzzed. New email. His eyes scanned the screen, and his blood ran cold. It was an internal investigation letter. A government inquiry into his business dealings. Roman staggered back. Killian had done it. He hadn't just destroyed Roman's reputation. He had made sure the feds were looking into him. Savannah walked in, her face pale. What now? Roman rubbed a hand over his face. He's making sure I can't run. His bank accounts were frozen. His business was under investigation. He had no allies left. And Killian was nowhere to be found. The realization hit like a brick. Killian wasn't just taking revenge. He was hunting them. Roman had never been the kind of man to panic. He had built himself from nothing, clawed his way to the top, and taken what he wanted. But now he was unraveling. He sat in his car outside a luxury hotel in downtown Atlanta. The biggest business gala of the year was being held inside, an event he was supposed to be the star of. Except, now he was nothing. His phone had been blowing up all day. Investors backing out. Clients disappearing. Lawsuits piling up. And yet he still walked inside, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He wasn't going to let Killian win. Savannah followed beside him, dressed in an elegant black dress, but her confidence was gone. She felt eyes on her, whispers behind her back. The moment they stepped into the ballroom, she knew. People weren't whispering. They were staring. Roman's hand tensed against hers. Something's wrong. Then the lights dimmed. A projector screen lit up. And suddenly, a video started playing. Savannah's heart stopped. Because on that screen was her and Roman. In bed. The gasps were deafening. Oh my God, is that? Holy shit, that's Savannah and Roman. Savannah's breath hitched. Her entire body froze. Roman lunged toward the sound booth. Turn it off. But the damage was done. The screen cut to black, but the whispers turned to laughter. Judgment. Outrage. Savannah felt like she was drowning. Roman grabbed her wrist and yanked her away. We have to go. Now. As they stormed toward the exit, Savannah saw something out of the corner of her eye. A man. Sitting at the bar. Watching. Killian. And on his face was the faintest smirk. Savannah sat in the passenger seat, her hands shaking violently. She had never felt fear like this. Roman was silent as he drove. His grip on the steering wheel was so tight his knuckles turned white. The humiliation. The exposure. Killian had just broadcasted their affair to the entire city. And worst of all, he had been there to watch it happen. Savannah felt her throat close. Roman, he's not stopping. Roman didn't answer. Her voice cracked. What if he never stops? Roman suddenly jerked the car to the side of the road. He turned to her, his eyes wild. Shut up, Savannah. Just shut the hell up. Savannah flinched. She had never seen him like this. He exhaled heavily, rubbing his face. I need to think. Savannah swallowed hard. She had made a mistake. She had chosen the wrong man. And now, Killian was making sure she suffered for it. Roman barely slept. He spent the entire night digging through his accounts, calling every connection he had left. Nothing. Killian had burned everything down. By the time morning came, his face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. Savannah had fallen asleep on the couch, but she looked just as broken. Then, his phone rang. An unknown number. Roman hesitated. Then, slowly he answered. A familiar voice. Calm. Controlled. Deadly. You're starting to look like a man on the edge, Roman. Roman's teeth clenched. Killian, you son of a... Killian chuckled. Careful now. You sound desperate. Roman stood abruptly. What the hell do you want? Just say it. Killian was silent for a moment. Then his tone darkened. I want you to know what it feels like to have your life stolen from you. Roman felt his blood run cold. Killian continued. I want you to wake up every day wondering what I'll take next. To feel that paranoia. That fear. That hopelessness. His voice dropped lower. You think this is over? Oh, Roman, this is only the beginning. Click. The line went dead. Roman's hands shook as he lowered the phone. And for the first time in his entire life, he felt completely powerless. Roman sat on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. He was losing control. His empire? Gone. His money? Frozen. His reputation? Destroyed. And the worst part? He couldn't stop it. Savannah sat across from him, staring blankly at the floor. She hadn't spoken in hours. The silence in the room was suffocating. Then, bang. A loud crash outside made both of them jump. Roman bolted to the window and pulled back the curtain. His car. Completely wrecked. The tires slashed. Windows shattered. A brick lay on the hood. Savannah gasped, clutching her chest. Oh my God. Roman stormed outside. His heart pounded as he snatched the brick and turned it over. There was something written on it. Now you have nothing left but each other. Roman whipped around, scanning the street. Nothing. No one in sight. But he knew. Killian had been here. And he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Roman couldn't sleep. Every shadow, every flicker of movement, it felt like Killian was watching him. Savannah wasn't doing any better. She spent most of the night pacing, checking the windows, jumping at every noise. The fear was setting in. Unshakable. Then Roman's phone rang. Unknown number. Again. He hesitated. Then answered. But this time it wasn't Killian. It was his lawyer. Roman, we have a serious problem. Roman's stomach dropped. What now? His lawyer sighed. Your company. The government is officially launching a fraud investigation against you. Roman's breath hitched. What? That's impossible. It's happening. And whoever gave them the information knew exactly where to look. Killian. Roman gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. That bastard had just cut off his last escape route. He wasn't just ruining his life. He was making sure Roman would never come back from this. Savannah couldn't take it anymore. She had lost everything. Her job? Gone. Her friends? Gone. Her reputation? Completely destroyed. She thought she could handle the whispers, the online humiliation, the stares when she walked down the street. But now, she was living a nightmare. And it was all Killian's doing. She sat on the bathroom floor, knees tucked to her chest. Tears streamed down her face. For the first time she understood. Killian wasn't going to stop until there was nothing left of her. The memories hit her hard. The man she betrayed. The man who loved her with everything he had. And she threw it away. For what? For Roman? A man who was now more broken than she was? A sob tore from her throat. I should have stayed loyal. Then her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Did you think I forgot about you, Savannah? Her heart stopped. She stared at the message, her fingers trembling over the screen. Then, the next text came. Unknown number, I'm not done yet. Savannah's vision blurred with panic. Her breathing turned shallow. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was Killian playing God. She had to do something. But what? Roman sat in the darkness of his living room, his gun resting on the table in front of him. He had always been the one in control. The one who dictated the rules. But now Now he was just another pawn in Killian's game. His business was in shambles. His money? Untouchable. His allies? Scattered. And worst of all? He was trapped. Savannah sat across from him, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked lost. Hello. Roman clenched his jaw. We need to get ahead of him. Savannah barely reacted. How? He's already 10 steps ahead. Roman pushed to his feet, running a hand through his hair. Bishop. He might have a way to track Killian down. Savannah let out a humorless laugh. You think you can stop him? Look at us, Roman. We're already dead to him. Roman ignored her and grabbed his phone, dialing Bishop. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, Bishop answered. Roman, don't call me again. Roman's stomach dropped. What? Killian warned me. Told me to stay out of it. I'm not risking my life for you, man. You're on your own. Click. The line went dead. Roman stared at the phone in disbelief. Even his old friends had abandoned him. He turned to Savannah. It's just us now. And for the first time, the realization hit them both. There was no way out. Savannah woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She squinted at the screen. Another unknown number. Her heart pounded. She already knew who it was. Slowly she answered. Killian? Silence. Then, his voice. Come. Cold. Controlled. I always wondered something, Savannah. She swallowed. What? Killian chuckled softly. Did you ever love me? Or was it always a lie? Her throat tightened. Tears welled in her eyes. Killian, I made a mistake. His voice hardened. No, Savannah. You made a choice. Silence. Then he spoke again. Tell me, if I gave you one chance to undo everything, would you? Savannah covered her mouth, trying to suppress a sob. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Another silence. Then, a chilling laugh. Too bad. Some mistakes can't be undone. Click. The call ended. Savannah collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. And for the first time she truly understood. Killian wasn't just trying to ruin them. He wanted them to suffer. Killian sat in the corner of a dimly lit bar, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. He had broken them mentally, but now it was time for the final phase. Bishop slid into the seat across from him. Roman called me. Killian smirked. And what did you tell him? Bishop sighed. I told him he's alone. Killian's smirk widened. Good. Bishop leaned forward. You got what you wanted. Roman's done. Savannah's destroyed. What now? Killian tilted his head, considering. Now, I make sure they never forget what they did. Bishop studied him carefully. And after that? Killian exhaled slowly, taking a sip of his whiskey. After that, maybe I finally let go. But deep down he wasn't sure if he ever could. The war wasn't over yet. And Roman and Savannah? They still had more to lose. Roman sat in his dimly lit apartment, a bottle of whiskey in front of him. His hands were shaking. He hadn't slept in days. Hadn't eaten. Hadn't done anything but wait for the next attack. The next humiliation. Because that's what Killian did. He didn't just destroy people. He made them live in fear. A sudden knock on the door made Roman's blood run cold. Savannah looked up from the couch, her eyes sunken, her body wrapped in a blanket. Are you expecting someone? Roman didn't answer. He grabbed his gun from the table and slowly approached the door. His breath felt too loud. Another knock. Harder this time. He yanked the door open, gun raised, but no one was there. Just an envelope. Roman hesitated before picking it up. He ripped it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single Polaroid. His car? Gone. Business? Gone. Reputation? Gone. But what sent a shiver through his spine was what was written in Killian's handwriting on the bottom. Still breathing, Roman? Not for long. The laptop screen flickered in the dimly lit room. Savannah and Roman sat frozen as a new video popped up on YouTube. The title alone made Savannah's stomach turn. The truth about betrayal, a special message. She exchanged a glance with Roman before clicking on it. The screen turned black for a moment. Then Killian appeared. His face was shadowed, only his sharp, cold eyes visible as he leaned forward. And then he spoke. Thank you all for your love and support. Savannah's stomach dropped. We've successfully reached 1,000 subscribers, and this is just the beginning. Roman's pulse hammered. What was he doing? I'll be putting in even more effort to bring you the best and most engaging stories. And trust me, the next chapter? Killian smirked. It's going to be unforgettable. Savannah couldn't breathe. Roman was turning pale. Then Killian's eyes locked onto the camera. Now let's aim for 2,000 subscribers. Savannah felt sick. Killian was broadcasting this to the world. Mocking them. Exposing them. Then his voice dropped lower. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. The screen flickered again. Savannah's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just revenge. This was a show. And the worst part? People were watching. Killian smirked one last time before speaking directly into the camera. Before I go, tell me, which city are you watching from? The video cut to black. Roman stood, knocking over the chair. His face was red with rage. He's playing with us, he roared, punching the wall. Savannah just sat there, staring at the screen. Because she realized something. Killian wasn't just breaking them. He was making sure the entire world watched. Killian leaned back in his chair, watching the numbers climb. 1,000. 1,500. 2,000. The world loved a good downfall. And Roman and Savannah? They were the perfect tragedy. Bishop sat across from him, shaking his head. Damn Graves. You really are something else. Killian didn't respond. Because this wasn't about views or subscribers. This was about making sure Roman and Savannah never recovered. Bishop exhaled. So what's next? Killian's gaze darkened. The part where they beg. Savannah sat curled up on the couch, her body trembling as she stared at the black screen of the laptop. The video had ended, but the consequences were just beginning. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails. Every notification felt like a gunshot. Roman stood by the window, his fists clenched, his entire body shaking with fury. The walls were closing in and there was no escape. Roman, Savannah finally whispered. We need to stop him. Roman turned slowly, his eyes burning. You think I don't know that? Savannah flinched at his tone but held her ground. I don't mean running. I don't mean hiding. I mean actually stopping him. Roman let out a bitter laugh. And how exactly do you suggest we do that? Killian isn't playing a game, Savannah. He's already won. She hated how right he was. She picked up her phone, scrolling through the messages. Karma's AB asterisk ha, Savannah? Hope it was worth it. Look at you now. Roman Calloway, the fraud. The cheater. The disgrace of Crestwood. Her hands tightened around the device. Even their city had turned on them. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe. What if we talk to him? Roman snapped his gaze to her. Are you out of your damn mind? Savannah swallowed. You think we can just walk up to Killian and say, hey man, sorry for betraying you. Can you stop ruining our lives now? Roman's laugh was sharp, bitter. He wants us to suffer. A silence stretched between them. Savannah clenched her jaw. Then we give him what he wants. Roman narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? She took a shaky breath. We surrender. Killian wasn't hard to find. Not because he was hiding. But because he wanted them to find him. Savannah and Roman sat in the car parked outside a downtown bar. The neon lights flickered above the entrance, and the hum of the city felt louder than ever. They both stared through the windshield, neither moving. This was it. Roman adjusted his jacket, gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. This is a bad idea. Savannah swallowed. It's our only idea. Roman exhaled sharply before pushing the door open. Let's get this over with. They stepped into the bar, the smell of whiskey and cigar smoke thick in the air. The place was crowded, noisy, yet one person stood out immediately. Killian sat at the corner booth, a glass of bourbon in his hand, completely unfazed. He had seen them the second they walked in. A smirk curled at his lips as he leaned back, exhaling. Well, look who finally decided to crawl out of their hole. Savannah's throat closed up. Roman clenched his fists but said nothing. Killian gestured to the empty seat across from him. Sit. Let's talk. Savannah slowly slid into the booth, Roman beside her, stiff as a board. Killian swirled his drink before speaking. You're here to beg, aren't you? Roman's jaw clenched. We want this to stop. Killian laughed. A low, dark, almost amused laugh. Stop. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. You stole my life and now you want mercy? Savannah's eyes filled with tears. Please, Killian. We know we hurt you. We know we. You don't know a damn thing. Killian's voice turned cold, lethal. Savannah flinched. Roman exhaled sharply. What do you want? Money? A public apology? Tell us how to end this. Killian took a slow sip of his bourbon before setting the glass down. Then he smiled. You don't get to end this. I do. Roman's chest tightened. Savannah felt her stomach drop. Killian. You want this to stop? Killian cut her off, his eyes locked onto them like a predator. Fine. Here's my offer. He leaned in, his voice calm, terrifying. Roman, you confess. Publicly. Tell the world that you're a fraud, a liar, a cheat. Admit everything. And Savannah? He tilted his head at her. You disappear. Savannah's breath caught. Disappear? Killian smirked. Leave Crestwood. Walk away from everything. Don't look back. Ever. And if you do, I'll finish what I started. Savannah's hands clenched into fists. That's. Killian held up a hand. Not negotiable. Roman's entire body stiffened. You're insane. Killian's smirk faded instantly. His eyes turned dangerous. No, Roman. His voice was deadly quiet. What's insane is thinking you could steal my life and walk away unscathed. Savannah swallowed hard. And if we refuse? Killian shrugged. Then you both lose everything. And trust me, you haven't even seen the worst yet. Roman exhaled heavily, running a hand over his face. Savannah felt her heart racing. This was real. This was happening. Killian had backed them into a corner. Roman looked up, his voice shaking with anger. You won't be satisfied until we have nothing, will you? Killian stared at him for a long moment before whispering. You already have nothing. I just want to make sure you feel it. Roman sat in the driver's seat of his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His breathing was uneven, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. His heart pounded like a war drum. Killian's words replayed in his head. Confess or lose everything. Savannah disappears. Forever. If you don't, you haven't even seen the worst yet. Roman shook his head violently. He couldn't do this. Savannah sat beside him, staring blankly at the dashboard. She was silent. Too silent. He finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. You're not actually considering doing what he says, are you? Savannah exhaled shakily. Roman, what choice do we have? Roman slammed his fist against the steering wheel. We fight. We don't bow to him. Savannah turned to him, her eyes dead and hollow. We've already lost. There's nothing left to fight for. Roman stared at her. For the first time she looked truly broken. And for the first time, he felt the fear creeping into his own chest. Because he knew she was right. They had lost. And Killian wasn't done yet. Savannah sat on the edge of her hotel bed, staring at her phone screen. Her fingers hovered over a number. Killian. Her thumb trembled. She had spent the last 6 years lying to herself, believing she had moved on from him. But now the truth was choking her. She had never moved on. And worst of all, she knew she had lost the best thing she ever had. Taking a deep breath, she finally hit call. Rang. Once. Twice. Then he answered. Silence filled the line. Then Killian's voice, calm and unshaken. Savannah. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Tears blurred her vision. She swallowed hard. Killian, please. Silence. Then Killian chuckled. But it wasn't humor. It was cold. Empty. Are you crying, Savannah? She choked back a sob. I'm sorry. I swear to God I'm sorry. Killian inhaled deeply. Sorry doesn't fix betrayal. Savannah squeezed her eyes shut. I know. But please, Killian, just tell me, do you hate me? Another silence. Then Killian's voice dropped dangerously low. I don't hate you, Savannah. She felt her breath catch. Then he added, I just don't care anymore. Click. The call ended. Savannah sat there, her entire body shaking. And for the first time, she felt it. The weight of losing a man like Killian. Roman hadn't slept. His mind raced with one thought. Killian was forcing his hand. If he didn't confess, Killian would do something worse. Something that would make this humiliation seem like child's play. His laptop sat open, the bright screen illuminating the dark hotel room. A live stream was set up. Ready to go. Roman swallowed the lump in his throat. If he pressed Start broadcast. It was over. His entire career. His reputation. His name. Everything. He glanced at Savannah. She sat on the floor, her head against the wall, her eyes lifeless. She had given up. And maybe it was time he did too. Taking a deep breath, he moved the cursor over the button. And then he clicked it. The screen changed. The timer started. The world was watching. Roman took a shaky breath and stared into the camera. My name is Roman Calloway, and this is my confession. Roman sat in front of the laptop, staring into the cold, unblinking eye of the camera. The live stream timer counted up. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and in that moment he realized something. He had no way out. Savannah sat on the floor beside him, her arms wrapped around her knees, her breathing shaky. The chat on the screen exploded instantly. Wait, is this real? Roman Calloway going live? After everything? Buckle up, y'all. He's about to beg. Roman's chest tightened. The whole world was watching. Killian had orchestrated this perfectly. He forced Roman to ruin himself. He licked his dry lips and finally spoke. My name is Roman Calloway, and this is my confession. The chat went wild. The numbers climbed. 5,000 viewers. 10,000 viewers. 20,000 viewers. His voice trembled. I built my company on lies. I used stolen military contracts. I paid people off. And he swallowed hard. The next words almost choked him. And I betrayed my best friend. The chat exploded. He said it. OMG, he really screwed Killian over. Damn, this is karma in 4K. Roman ran a shaking hand through his hair. He had lost. Killian had made sure of it. Then, a message appeared on the screen. From an unknown user. Good boy. Now let's see if Savannah follows. Roman's stomach dropped. Savannah gasped. Because they both knew. Killian wasn't done yet. Savannah's heart pounded. Her breath came in quick, panicked bursts. She had just watched Roman confess. Now, it was her turn. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, your turn, sweetheart. She covered her mouth, shaking. Roman looked at her, his eyes hollow. If you don't do it, he'll make it worse. Savannah wanted to scream. She grabbed the laptop, her hands trembling. The live stream was still running. The chat was hungry for more. Where's Savannah? She's next. If she doesn't talk, she's guilty AF. This is insane. Killian's a genius. She took a shaky breath. My name is Savannah Graves, and this is my confession. 30,000 viewers. 50,000 viewers. 100,000 viewers. The world was watching her fall. I cheated. I lied. I destroyed the best thing I ever had. Her voice cracked. I betrayed the only man who ever truly loved me. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. And now, I have nothing. The chat exploded. OMG, she admitted it. Karma is a queen and her name is Killian Graves. Nah, she deserves everything she's getting. Savannah choked on a sob. And then, another message appeared on the screen. Now disappear, Savannah. She stared at it, her vision blurry with tears. She had agreed to Killian's deal. Confess. And disappear forever. Savannah looked at Roman, but he didn't meet her eyes. Because deep down they both knew. This was checkmate. The live stream ended. Savannah felt numb. Roman didn't move. It was over. Everything. Her career. Her life in Crestwood. Her entire reputation. Killian had done exactly what he promised. He had ruined them. She picked up her phone with shaky hands and typed a message. Savannah, Killian, please, just, can we talk? No response. Savannah, I know I hurt you. I was stupid. But I can't leave like this. Still nothing. Roman finally spoke, his voice raw. Where will you go? Savannah swallowed hard. She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She had to leave Crestwood. Because if she stayed, Killian would finish her for good. The city that once embraced her now felt like a graveyard. Savannah stood in her nearly empty apartment, staring at the packed suitcases by the door. She had nowhere to go, but she couldn't stay here. Her phone screen lit up. Unknown number, time's up, Savannah. Her hands shook as she gripped the phone. Killian hadn't responded to her texts. No calls. No chance to explain. Nothing. And yet he was still watching. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. The street outside was quiet. But she knew. Somewhere out there, Killian was making sure she left. A deep ache settled in her chest. I should have stayed loyal, she whispered. A knock on the door made her jump. Her breath hitched. Was it? No. Roman stood there looking like a ghost of himself. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. You're really leaving? He muttered. Savannah swallowed. I don't have a choice. Roman leaned against the doorframe, his lips pressing into a thin line. We lost. Savannah nodded. We did. For a moment, they were just two broken people staring at the wreckage they had created. Then Roman exhaled sharply. Where will you go? She hesitated. I don't know. Roman chuckled bitterly. He's making sure we'll never rebuild. You know that, right? Savannah nodded. She knew. Killian hadn't just destroyed them. He had made sure they never recovered. Savannah left Crestwood just before sunrise. The city lights blurred behind her as she drove onto the empty highway, her heart heavier than it had ever been. She didn't know where she was going. She just drove. The past played in her mind like a movie on repeat. The way Killian used to look at her like she was the only thing that mattered. The way she threw it all away for something that meant nothing. The moment she realized she had lost him forever. She pulled off at a gas station, hands trembling as she reached for her phone. There was only one person she wanted to call. Savannah, Killian, please. Just one conversation. That's all I ask. Her fingers hovered over the send button. Then, she pressed it. The message sent. And she waited. And waited. Minutes passed. No response. She let out a shaky breath, her chest tightening. Then, her phone vibrated. Unknown number, drive west. I'll meet you at the diner off Route 7. Savannah's breath hitched. Killian. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Was this a second chance? Or was this another game? She had no idea. But she had to find out. She threw the car into gear and sped toward Route 7. The diner was empty when Savannah arrived. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow on the cracked pavement. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the door. The air smelled like coffee and old regrets. And there, in the corner booth, sat Killian. The man she had destroyed. The man who had destroyed her in return. He looked up, his expression unreadable. For the first time, she didn't see the man she once loved. She saw a ghost. Savannah stepped forward slowly, her heart hammering. You actually came. Killian leaned back, his cold gaze never leaving hers. I wanted to see if you'd actually follow orders this time. Savannah flinched. He still had that power over her. She swallowed hard. I deserved everything you did to me. Killian let out a low laugh. Yeah, you did. Savannah's throat tightened. But I need to know, was there ever a moment where you thought about forgiving me? Killian was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. There was. Savannah's heart skipped. Then he leaned in, his voice deadly quiet. But that moment passed a long time ago. Savannah's chest caved in. She nodded slowly, biting the inside of her cheek to keep from breaking completely. Killian's voice softened just slightly. I loved you, Savannah. She clutched the table, trying not to fall apart. I know, she whispered. I loved you too. Killian studied her for a moment, then leaned back. Too bad, huh? The words cut through her like a blade. Savannah blinked back tears. This was it. The final goodbye. She stood up, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. Goodbye, Killian, she whispered. Killian didn't move. Didn't blink. Just as she turned to leave, his voice cut through the silence one last time. Take care, Savannah. Her breath hitched. She didn't look back. She walked out the door. And for the first time, she knew she'd never see him again. Roman sat alone in his dark apartment, staring at the half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. His phone sat next to it, screen glowing with missed calls, unread messages, and emails filled with legal threats. Fraud investigation pending. Former business partners cutting ties. Investors demanding repayment. He had lost everything. Savannah was gone. His company was in ruins. His reputation? A joke. And Killian? Killian had beaten him. Roman clenched his jaw. No, he wasn't going down like this. His fingers hovered over his phone before he made a decision that would either save him or damn him further. He dialed a number. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Roman. His pulse quickened. Luther. I need a favor. Pause. Then a cold laugh. A favor? After the mess you're in? Roman swallowed hard. You said you had men. That you could. Luther cut him off. Killian, right? Roman hesitated. Luther sighed. You really don't get it, do you? Killian isn't a man you handle. He's a ghost. He's a soldier trained to end men like you. Roman's grip on the phone tightened. I don't need him dead. Just neutralized. Another long pause. Then Luther chuckled. You want to survive this, Roman? There's only one way. You sell Killian out first. Roman's stomach twisted. Sell him out to who? Luther's voice dropped lower. The feds. Roman's blood ran cold. He had no other options. And so he made the final call. To the only people who could take Killian Graves down. Killian sat at his usual booth in the dimly lit bar, sipping his whiskey, watching the world move without him. Savannah was gone. Roman was broken. It should have been enough. And yet, a familiar figure slid into the seat across from him. Bishop Kane. Killian raised a brow. Didn't expect to see you so soon. Bishop leaned forward, his expression unreadable. You need to disappear. Now. Killian's grip on his glass tightened. Why? Bishop's gaze darkened. Roman sold you out. Killian stilled. His body didn't move, but his mind was already processing 1,000 outcomes. Bishop continued, voice low. The feds are watching you. Looking into your past, your military records, your contracts. Roman threw them everything he could find. Killian's jaw clenched. The bastard's desperate. Bishop nodded. And desperation makes people dangerous. Killian finished his whiskey in one slow sip before setting the glass down. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile. A dangerous one. Roman made his last mistake. Bishop exhaled. What's the plan? Killian stood up, grabbing his jacket. The plan? He smirked. To make sure Roman never gets the chance to crawl out of this alive. Roman sat in the back of a black SUV, his hands sweaty as he watched the FBI agent across from him. The agent, a sharp-dressed man named Agent Carter, flipped through a thick folder. Inside, everything Roman had given them about Killian. His military service. His classified missions. His history of disappearing enemies. Agent Carter tapped the folder. You do understand what happens next, right? Roman swallowed. You arrest him. You make sure he never. The agent held up a hand. No, that's not how this works. Roman's heart pounded. What do you mean? Agent Carter leaned forward. Men like Killian Graves don't get arrested. They get eliminated. Roman's throat went dry. This wasn't just about getting rid of Killian. This was about burying him. Roman felt a rush of relief. Finally it would be over. But then, a loud bang. The SUV lurched violently to the side. Roman's head slammed against the window. Gunshots. Shouts. The driver screamed as the SUV crashed into a pole. Roman gasped, his vision spinning. What the hell just happened? The passenger door was yanked open. And standing there with cold, merciless eyes, was Killian. Roman's entire body froze in terror. Killian leaned down, gripping Roman's collar. You really thought you could bury me, Roman? Roman couldn't breathe. And in that moment, he realized he had made his last mistake. Roman's lungs burned as Killian dragged him out of the wrecked SUV. The gunshots had stopped, the feds' backup was nowhere in sight. The cold night air stung his face as he was slammed against the hood of a nearby car. Killian's grip was iron. His eyes? Empty. Deadly. Roman struggled, but it was useless. Killian had always been stronger. Faster. Smarter. And now, he was furious. Did you really think selling me out to the feds was gonna save you? Killian's voice was calm. Too calm. Roman gasped for air. I didn't have a choice. Killian laughed coldly. You always had a choice. You just chose wrong. Roman's heart pounded. He tried to keep his breathing steady. He had to think. You kill me, Roman rasped. The FBI will never stop looking for you. Killian tilted his head. You think they don't already have a file on me? Roman's mouth went dry. He was trapped. Please, Killian, he whispered. Just let me go. I'll leave. I swear. I'll disappear. Killian's grip tightened around his throat. I already gave you a chance to disappear. Roman choked. Killian. Killian leaned in, his voice a whisper of death. You stole my life. Roman's vision blurred. His chest ached. And now? Killian's smirk was cold. I take yours. A sudden gunshot rang out. Roman gasped. Killian stumbled back, gripping his shoulder. Roman's eyes widened. Someone shot Killian? Then flashing red and blue lights filled the night. Sirens. FBI backup. Roman sucked in a sharp breath. He was saved. Or so he thought. Because Killian? He was still standing. Still breathing. Still looking at him like a predator who hadn't finished his hunt. Roman's blood ran cold. This wasn't over. Not yet. Killian gritted his teeth as he ducked behind a car, gripping his wounded shoulder. The gunshot hadn't killed him, but it slowed him down. FBI agents swarmed the area, their voices barking orders, guns raised. He had seconds to decide. Run, fight, or disappear. Bishop's voice rang in his head. You need to vanish. Killian clenched his jaw. He was right. This wasn't about Roman anymore. This was about survival. He reached into his pocket, pressing a small detonator. Across the street, an abandoned truck exploded. Boom. The shockwave rocked the entire block. Screams. Chaos. Smoke. Killian ran. His muscles screamed in pain, but he pushed forward, weaving through alleyways, cutting corners, disappearing into the city like a shadow. The FBI would search for him. But they wouldn't find him. Because Killian Graves was already gone. Roman sat in an FBI interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the table. His face was bruised, his eyes hollow. Killian had disappeared. The FBI was furious. And Roman? He was the only one left to take the fall. Agent Carter sat across from him, his expression stone cold. You lost, Calloway. Roman swallowed, his throat dry. I gave you everything on Killian. And you still let him get away. Agent Carter leaned forward. Killian didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. Roman's chest tightened. You're looking at a long time in prison for fraud, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Roman felt sick. His entire life, gone. He had betrayed Killian to save himself. And in the end, Killian walked free. And he was the one rotting in a jail cell. Roman's head dropped onto the table. For the first time in his life, he had truly lost. The world wanted answers. News stations flooded the airwaves with reports of the shocking downfall of Roman Calloway. Breaking news. Business tycoon Roman Calloway arrested. FBI confirms criminal investigation. Sources say former Special Forces operative Killian Graves is a ghost. Manhunt underway. Who is Killian Graves? A soldier? A vigilante? A man seeking revenge. But Killian Graves? He no longer existed. A month had passed since the FBI raid. Roman sat in a maximum security federal prison, his body hunched over, his spirit shattered. Every morning he woke up hoping it was all a nightmare. But it wasn't. The whispers in the yard followed him wherever he went. That's Roman Calloway. The fraud. He used to own an empire, now he cleans floors. Damn dude went from billionaire to nobody. Roman kept his head down. He had gone from powerful to powerless. From wealthy to forgotten. And the worst part? He knew Killian was still out there. Somewhere. Watching. Because every week, a letter arrived at the prison under an unknown sender. No return address. No explanation. Just one sentence. Still breathing, Roman? Roman's blood ran cold every time he read it. Because he knew. Killian would never let him forget. A warm breeze rolled over the beach, the golden sand stretching as far as the eye could see. In a small seaside town somewhere far from Crestwood, far from the past, a man sat at an outdoor cafe. His hair was shorter now, streaks of sunlight catching in the dark strands. His beard was neatly trimmed, his posture relaxed. To the outside world he was just another tourist enjoying a quiet morning. To those who knew him, he was Killian Graves. Or at least he used to be. Now, he went by another name. Connor Black. A waitress passed by, pausing as she refilled his coffee. You look like a man who's been places, she said, tilting her head. Killian, no, Connor, smirked slightly. Maybe I have. She smiled, handing him the check. Well, welcome to town, stranger. Connor nodded, watching her walk away. A new name. A new life. But could he ever truly let go? He picked up the newspaper next to his coffee, flipping to the business section. Roman Calloway sentenced to 25 years in prison. Ex-wife Savannah Graves reportedly relocated, living in seclusion. Mystery surrounds the disappearance of Killian Graves. Where is he now? Connor exhaled. He should have felt closure, satisfaction. But instead, there was just emptiness. Was this peace? Or just another form of exile? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the endless ocean. Connor stood by the water's edge, the waves crashing softly against the shore. His past was a ghost that would always follow him. He had his revenge. Roman was rotting in a cell. Savannah was nothing but a distant memory. And yet, he still felt like a man caught between two worlds. Was he a soldier? A ghost? A man seeking redemption? The wind blew against his face, the scent of salt filling his lungs. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number, still breathing Graves? His entire body tensed. It wasn't Roman. It wasn't Savannah. Then who? Connor smirked. Connor, always. He tucked the phone into his pocket, turned away from the water and walked toward the unknown. Because one thing was certain. The world hadn't seen the last of Killian Graves. And maybe, just maybe, this was just the beginning. The ocean stretched before him, endless and calm. The kind of calm that made Killian Connor Black uneasy. For the past few weeks, he had blended into the rhythm of this quiet seaside town. No one asked questions. No one looked too closely. And for a man like him, that was exactly what he needed. But something felt off. The world had moved on from the chaos he created, but he knew better. The past never stays buried. That truth arrived in the form of a thin white envelope slipped under his apartment door. No return address. No markings. Just his new name typed neatly on the front. Connor Black. He stared at it for a long moment before carefully tearing it open. Inside was a single Polaroid. A picture of himself, taken yesterday. Killian's blood ran cold. On the back, in familiar handwriting. You can run but you can't hide. His fingers tightened around the photo. Only one person signed their notes like that. Savannah. The last time he had seen Savannah, she was begging for forgiveness. That night at the diner had been their final goodbye. Or so he thought. Killian sat on his balcony, the cool night air pressing against his skin. He flipped the Polaroid over, staring at it. Why now? Savannah was supposed to be gone. Vanished. Living in obscurity. But this was a message. A warning. Or worse, a trap. His instincts screamed at him to ignore it. To disappear again. But another part of him, the part that had hunted men across war zones, needed to know. If Savannah had found him, then who else could? He grabbed his phone and made a call. The line rang twice before a voice answered. Took you long enough. Bishop Kane. Savannah's alive, Killian said, getting straight to the point. She found me. Bishop exhaled. Yeah. I figured she might. Killian's eyes narrowed. You knew. Pause. Then Bishop muttered, You're not gonna like what I tell you next. Killian clenched his jaw. Spit it out. Bishop hesitated before finally saying, She's not alone, Graves. The room suddenly felt colder. What the hell does that mean? Killian asked. Bishop's tone darkened. It means she's with people who want you dead. Killian wasn't a man who rattled easily. But as he stared at the Polaroid in his hand, his mind calculated every possible angle. Savannah was alive. She had found him. And she wasn't alone. Killian had expected revenge from Roman. But Roman was rotting in prison. So the question was, who had she aligned herself with? His gut told him that this wasn't just about Savannah. This was bigger. Someone wanted him gone. Someone had given her the resources to find him. And now, he was the one being hunted. Killian exhaled slowly. Who is she with, Bishop? A long pause. Then Bishop muttered, You ever hear of a guy named Hector Alvarez? Killian froze. Hector Alvarez was a name he hadn't heard in years. A cartel enforcer. A ghost in the underworld. A man who had once done business with the same corrupt military contractors Killian had taken down years ago. Savannah was working with him? Killian's mind raced. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. Bishop's voice cut through the silence. I don't know what Savannah told him, but Hector isn't the kind of man who forgives. He wants you gone, Graves. For good. Killian cracked his knuckles. Savannah had made her choice. Now it was his turn. Savannah stood in a dimly lit hotel room, her hands gripping the edge of the sink as she stared into the bathroom mirror. Her reflection was a stranger. Gone was the woman who once lived in luxury, who thrived in high society. That version of her had died the day Killian took everything. Now she was something else. She wiped a shaking hand across her face before stepping back into the room. Seated on the bed was Hector Alvarez. A tall, lean man with a quiet menace. His black shirt was crisp, his wrist adorned with an expensive watch. But his eyes? His eyes were what made people afraid. They were cold, unforgiving. And right now they were locked onto her. "You hesitated," Hector said, his voice smooth but sharp. Savannah stiffened. "No, I didn't." Hector smirked, leaning back against the headboard. "You still have doubts about this." She met his gaze, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I don't." Hector studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. "You still love him." Savannah flinched. "No," she lied. Hector's smirk widened. "Then why did it take you so long to agree to this?" Savannah clenched her fists. "Because I don't know if I want him dead." She hated Killian. Hated what he had done to her. But deep down, a small, broken part of her still wanted his forgiveness. She wasn't sure if she wanted him to suffer. Or to save her. Hector stood up, stepping close, his breath warm against her ear. "You gave me your word, Savannah," he murmured. "Killian dies. Or you do." Her heart pounded. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Killian moved like a shadow through the quiet streets of the small seaside town. He had been hunted before. But this time? It was personal. Savannah was involved. And that complicated everything. He had spent years reading people, knowing their tells, their weaknesses. Savannah was weak. She was emotional, ruled by guilt and impulse. That's why she had betrayed him before. But this wasn't just guilt. This was vengeance. And she had chosen the wrong man to align herself with. He reached Bishop's safe house, a small rundown house near the docks. Bishop let him in, shaking his head. "You're in deep graves?" Killian smirked. "When am I not?" Bishop motioned toward the laptop on the table. "She's in Mexico. Cancun to be exact. That's where Hector's set up shop." Killian's eyes narrowed. "And Savannah?" Bishop sighed. "She's there. With him." A slow rage burned through Killian's chest. Savannah had made her choice. Now it was his turn. Bishop leaned forward. "You're not seriously thinking of going there, are you?" Killian cracked his knuckles. "You already know the answer to that." Bishop exhaled. "Jesus Graves. You really don't know how to let things go." Killian smirked. "Neither does she. And that's what made it dangerous. This wasn't just about survival. This was about unfinished business. And by the time he was done, there wouldn't be a place left for Savannah or Hector to hide. The heat in Cancun was stifling. Savannah sat on the balcony of Hector's estate, staring out at the glowing city below. It was beautiful, but it felt like a prison. Hector's men watched her closely. She was a guest, yes, but she was also a pawn. She hated that. She had told herself that this was the only way to escape the mess Killian had left her in. But now, sitting here, she wondered if she had simply traded one powerful man for another. A sudden movement below caught her attention. Her stomach dropped. A man walked through the courtyard, flanked by two of Hector's guards. Tall, broad shoulders, dark, unforgiving eyes. Killian. Her breath hitched. He found her. A slow, sinking dread settled in her stomach. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a plea for forgiveness. Killian had come to finish what he started. Hector stepped onto the balcony beside her, watching the scene below with interest. Well, Hector murmured. "Looks like your past caught up to you." Savannah's heart pounded. She had betrayed Killian once. Now he was here to see if she would do it again. The moment Killian stepped into the courtyard of Hector's estate, he could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him. The humid Cancun air wrapped around him, thick and suffocating, but it wasn't the heat that made his pulse spike. It was the trap. Hector had men stationed everywhere. On the balconies, behind the cars, in the shadows. And standing beside Hector, her body tense, her eyes locked on Killian, Savannah. Killian kept his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable, but inside, his blood boiled. She had brought him here. She had chosen this. But the question was she leading him into a grave? Or trying to save herself? Hector took a slow drag from his cigar, exhaling lazily as he finally spoke. "You've got some balls walking in here alone, Graves?" Killian smirked. You sound impressed. Hector chuckled, but his men didn't move. Their guns didn't lower. Killian's eyes flickered to Savannah. She hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, but her hands were shaking. She was afraid. Killian's stomach twisted. Good. She should be. Hector tapped his cigar against the balcony railing, letting the ashes scatter in the wind. You know why you're here, don't you? Killian tilted his head slightly. Because your little pawn over there made a deal she couldn't keep? Savannah sucked in a breath. Hector's smirk widened. Something like that. Killian took a slow step forward. Let's get to the point, Hector. You want me dead? I'm standing right here. Hector laughed, shaking his head. Oh, Killian. I don't want you dead. Killian narrowed his eyes. Hector leaned forward, voice dropping. I want you ruined. Killian didn't move. Didn't flinch. Instead, he let Hector's words settle. Ruined. Not dead. Which meant Hector wanted something else. Killian's fingers twitched at his sides. The last time someone tried to make him a pawn, they ended up in a body bag. Hector smirked. You destroyed Roman. You wiped Savannah off the map. And now, you're the last piece left standing. Killian's jaw ticked. You sound like a man with a plan. Hector chuckled. I am. He motioned for one of his men to step forward. The guard tossed a folder onto the table between them. Killian didn't move. Hector nodded toward it. Go on. Take a look. Killian slowly reached down, flipping the folder open. His stomach tightened. Inside were classified military documents. His old missions. His kill orders. His records from the special forces. Things no one should have. Hector grinned. I did my research on you, Graves. Killian's fingers curled into a fist. This wasn't just a power move. This was leverage. Hector leaned in. The government wants you buried. You know that, don't you? Killian's mind worked quickly. How the hell had Hector gotten these files? Hector smirked like he could read Killian's thoughts. I have my sources. And here's my offer. Work for me. Use your skills for my business. Or I send this file to every agency that's hunting you. Savannah's breath hitched. Even she hadn't expected this. Killian finally spoke, his voice flat. You really think I'd become your pet? Hector chuckled. I think you don't have a choice. Savannah's fingers twitched at her side. She was watching Killian closely. Waiting. Hoping. For what? Forgiveness? A way out. Killian exhaled slowly. He had already played this game before. And this time? He was going to end it. The air in the courtyard thickened. Every man in Hector's crew was locked onto Killian, their fingers hovering over triggers. But Killian? He was smirking. Hector noticed. Something funny, Graves? Killian exhaled, shaking his head. You're making a mistake, Hector. Hector raised a brow. Oh? And why is that? Killian cracked his knuckles. Because I'm not the one who's trapped here. Savannah's breath hitched. Hector's smirk faded slightly. You really think you're walking out of here? Killian chuckled. I don't think, Hector. I know. And then, all hell broke loose. An explosion ripped through the front gate. Gunfire erupted from the rooftops. Hector's men scrambled for cover. Savannah screamed, ducking behind a stone pillar as bullets tore through the air. Hector's face twisted in rage. What the foo? Killian moved. Fast. Precise. Ruthless. He disarmed the first guard, snapping his wrist. Took the second man down with a single bullet. Rolled behind cover before Hector could react. Hector staggered back. You set this up? Killian smirked. What can I say? I hate making deals. Savannah's heart pounded. She watched in shock as Killian tore through Hector's crew like a man possessed. This wasn't a simple revenge mission. This was a war. Killian moved toward her, eyes burning with fury. Come with me, he ordered. Savannah froze. A choice. Stay with Hector and die. Run with Killian and, what? She looked at the man she had betrayed. The man she had loved. And in that moment she knew. This was the end. One way or another. The courtyard was in chaos. Gunfire ripped through the night, bodies dropping one by one as Killian moved like a phantom, eliminating Hector's men with ruthless efficiency. Savannah pressed herself against the stone pillar, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had made so many mistakes. And now, she was out of time. Hector's voice boomed through the chaos. Savannah. If you run with him, you'll never be safe. She turned her head. Hector was bleeding, his face twisted with fury. His gun was raised. Not at Killian. At her. Her breath hitched. "Last chance, sweetheart," Hector growled. "Choose. Me or him." Her eyes flickered to Killian. He was already looking at her. And in that moment she saw it. The past. The pain. The man who had once loved her more than anything. She had betrayed him. But despite everything, he still came for her. Savannah's fingers tightened around the pistol tucked in her waistband. And then, she made her choice. Bang. One shot. Straight through Hector's skull. Savannah gasped, her hands trembling as Hector's body dropped to the ground. Killian didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Just stared. Savannah met his gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "I choose you." For a long moment there was only silence. Then Killian reached out, grabbing her wrist. "Then run." And together they disappeared into the night. They ran. Through dark alleyways. Past abandoned streets. Through the maze of Cancun's underworld. Savannah's lungs burned, her legs screaming for rest, but she didn't stop. Because Killian hadn't let go of her wrist. He was pulling her forward. Leading her. Keeping her alive. Gunshots echoed in the distance. Hector's men weren't giving up. The hunt was still on. They burst into a small safe house near the docks, slamming the door behind them. Savannah doubled over, gasping for air. Killian pulled a gun from his waistband, checking the magazine. Savannah swallowed, her voice hoarse. "I killed him." Killian didn't look up. "I know." She exhaled shakily. "I didn't think I could." Killian's hands stilled for half a second. Then he finally met her gaze. "Neither did I." The weight of those words hit her like a truck. This wasn't about Hector. This was about them. The past. The betrayal. The war they had waged on each other. And despite everything, she was still here. Still by his side. "Are we safe?" she whispered. Killian's expression darkened. "Not yet." Savannah swallowed hard. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, she realized something. It wasn't just Hector's men hunting them. It was the FBI. The government. Everyone Killian had ever burned. They weren't just escaping Hector's world. They were escaping everything. And the only way out? Was to burn everything down behind them. Killian sat on the edge of the bed, loading the last of his ammunition. Savannah sat across from him, watching. Studying. Because this wasn't just a mission to him. This was a purge. She licked her lips, her voice softer than before. "Where do we go from here?" Killian didn't answer immediately. Because the truth? There was nowhere left to go. The FBI wanted him dead. The cartels wanted his head. And now, with Hector gone, there would be a power vacuum. New threats would rise. And every single one of them would want revenge. So he did what he always did. He planned. Killian finally looked up, his voice steady. "We disappear." Savannah's throat tightened. "Disappear?" Killian stood, slipping a false passport into his pocket. "Savannah Graves is dead," he murmured. "Connor Black and his new wife, however?" He smirked slightly. "They're catching a flight to Spain." Savannah's breath caught. "Wife?" she echoed. Killian met her gaze. Unflinching. Unreadable. She had betrayed him. He had destroyed her. And yet here they were. He stepped closer, his voice low. "The only way we survive this is together." Savannah's stomach twisted. This wasn't a proposal. This was a survival pact. And she knew deep down she would never escape Killian Graves. Because he had become her entire world. And now, she was about to become his. The private jet soared over the Atlantic, cutting through the clouds as if the entire world behind them no longer existed. But Savannah knew better. She sat beside Killian in the luxurious leather seats, staring out the window as the ocean stretched beneath them. It felt unreal. Just 2 weeks ago, she was trapped in a life she couldn't control, running from the destruction she helped create. Now she was sitting beside the most dangerous man she had ever known. Her husband. Kind of. She glanced at Killian, who was flipping through a passport, checking fake documents. His fingers moved precisely, efficiently, like a man who had done this before. Because he had. He was a ghost now. No more Killian Graves. No more Savannah Graves. Now, Connor and Claire Black. A married couple relocating to Spain. Savannah swallowed, her stomach twisting. "This isn't normal," she muttered, crossing her arms. Killian barely glanced at her. "Define normal." She exhaled sharply, her frustration rising. Do you really think we can just run forever? Killian finally set the passport down and turned to her. Those eyes. The same ones that once loved her. The same ones that destroyed her. And now, they belong to a man with nothing left to lose. We don't have a choice, he said flatly. Savannah shook her head. We could start over. Killian let out a low laugh. You don't start over when you've buried as many bodies as I have. Her chest tightened. Killian. Connor, he corrected. And you're Claire now. Savannah felt the shift. The finality. Her real name? Gone. Her past? Erased. She was no longer Savannah Graves. She was whatever Killian made her. And the worst part? She let him. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned back to the window. She had chosen him. Now she had to live with that choice. They landed in Spain just before sunrise. Savannah felt uneasy stepping out of the jet, her legs stiff, her stomach tied in knots. This wasn't a vacation. This wasn't a honeymoon. This was survival. Killian moved effortlessly, like a man who had planned for this moment for years. He tossed a bag at her. She caught it, frowning. What is this? Your new life, he said, not even looking at her. She opened it, her breath catching. A new passport. Credit cards and a name she didn't recognize. A gun. She stared at the weapon, her fingers hovering over it. Why do I need this? Killian finally turned, his face unreadable. Because sooner or later someone will come looking for us. Her heart skipped. Someone? Wait, she whispered. I thought we were safe. Killian's jaw clenched. We're ghosts, Savannah. But ghosts still have shadows. She shivered. Who? Killian exhaled slowly. The FBI. The remnants of Hector's cartel. People who wanted revenge. Does it matter? He asked. Savannah swallowed hard. And what happens when they find us? Killian smirked coldly. They won't leave alive. Savannah's chest tightened. Was this really her life now? Always running? Always hiding? Always looking over her shoulder? She wasn't sure how long she could survive like this. And worse? She wasn't sure if Killian even wanted to survive at all. Because this wasn't about freedom. This was about who would outlast the other. And for the first time, Savannah wondered, what happens when the only thing left to destroy is each other? The waves crashed softly against the rocky cliffs, the Spanish coastline stretching into the horizon like an untouched painting. Killian, Connor Black, stood at the edge of the balcony, a glass of whiskey in one hand, his other resting on the railing. It had been 6 months since they vanished. 6 months of living under fake names, false histories, and carefully rehearsed lies. 6 months since the world stopped looking for Savannah Graves and Killian Graves. And yet, he knew someone would come. They always did. Behind him, Savannah sat on the couch, flipping through an old book she wasn't really reading. She was different now. Stronger? Maybe. Colder? Definitely. Her voice broke the silence. Do you ever wonder if we'll actually make it? Killian sipped his drink, his jaw tightening. Make it where? Savannah hesitated. To the end of the road. Killian let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. There is no end of the road, Savannah. There's just the next person who comes looking for us. She exhaled softly, setting the book down. And if no one comes? Killian finally turned, leaning against the railing. Then I guess we won. Savannah studied him, her gaze flickering with something unreadable. And what happens after we win? She asked quietly. Killian stared at her for a long moment. And then? He did something he never did. He told the truth. Then we wait to see who betrays who first. Savannah's throat tightened. Because deep down she knew. That was the only ending left. That night, Killian didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in the darkness watching the door. Waiting. Because even now, with everything behind them, he didn't trust her. And she? She didn't trust him either. How could they? She had betrayed him first. He had ruined her life in return. And now the only thing left standing was a lie. He finished his drink and walked to the mirror. The man staring back at him wasn't Killian Graves. It wasn't Connor Black either. It was someone in between. Someone who had spent his entire life burning everything down. And maybe, just maybe, this was the last fire. Savannah watched him from across the room, her heart beating too fast. For the first time she wondered, was Killian waiting for her to betray him again? Or was he waiting for himself to do it first? A chilling thought settled in her mind. Maybe he wasn't running from his enemies anymore. Maybe he was waiting for the day he and Savannah finally became them. The screen fades to black. And then a familiar voice. Killian's voice. And now, it's your turn to choose. What do you think happens next? Does Savannah betray me again? Or do I end it before she can? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Because trust me, this isn't the last story I have to tell. Fade to black. The end. Killian and Savannah are together, but their story isn't over. Their greatest enemy now? Each other. The audience must decide what happens next. Drop a comment. Who betrays who first? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more stories like this. The story is finished, but the legend of Killian Graves will never die.